In all my years of studying mythology, of examining the patterns that repeat across cultures and throughout human history, I've noticed something profound. Every great story contains what we might call shadow figures. These are the characters who embody the dark aspects of human nature. The trickster who deceives, the tyrant who dominates, the dragon who hoards, the witch who manipulates. These aren't just entertaining villains in old stories. These are archetypal patterns that exist in the human psyche. They're parts of human nature that we all carry within us to some degree. And they're patterns we encounter in real people, in real relationships, in real life. One of the most challenging of these shadow patterns is what we might call the narcissist. Now, I'm not talking about clinical diagnosis here. I'm talking about a pattern of behavior, a way of being in the world, that's characterized by an inflated sense of self-importance, a deep need for admiration, a lack of empathy for others, and a willingness to manipulate and exploit to get what they want. The mythology is full of such figures. Narcissus himself, who fell in love with his own reflection and couldn't tear himself away. The false king who maintains power through deception and manipulation. The shapeshifter who changes form to trick and control. These mythological figures teach us something important. Narcissistic patterns have been part of the human experience for as long as humans have been telling stories. And one of the most important things these stories teach us is this. When a narcissist can't manipulate you through their usual means, when you've learned to see through their tactics, when you've developed immunity to their games, they don't just give up. They have one final tactic. One last strategy. One ultimate weapon they'll deploy when everything else has failed. Today I want to tell you what that tactic is. Because understanding it might be one of the most important things you can learn in navigating relationships, in protecting your psychological well-being, in staying on your own hero's journey when someone is trying to pull you off your path. Understanding the narcissist's usual arsenal. But first, we need to understand the narcissist's usual tactics. Because you can't understand the final tactic, the one they use when everything else fails, without understanding what comes before it. The narcissist's fundamental problem is this. They have a grandiose self-image that doesn't match reality. They see themselves as special, superior, entitled to admiration and special treatment. But deep down, often unconsciously, they know this isn't quite true. There's a fragility underneath the grandiosity, a fundamental insecurity that must be constantly defended against. To maintain this false self-image, the narcissist needs what we call narcissistic supply. This is attention, admiration, validation, anything that reinforces their grandiose self-image. And they'll use various tactics to get it. The first tactic is charm. Many narcissists are incredibly charming, at least initially. They're often charismatic, engaging, fun to be around. They make you feel special, seen, understood. This is called love bombing in relationship contexts, but it applies more broadly. The narcissist showers you with attention and admiration, making you feel wonderful, drawing you into their orbit. Why does this work? Because it's appealing. We all want to be seen, appreciated, valued. And the narcissist, at least initially, seems to offer this in abundance. But here's the thing, they're not really seeing you. They're seeing what you can do for them, how you can serve their needs, what narcissistic supply you can provide. The second tactic is manipulation. Once they've drawn you in, once you're invested in the relationship, the manipulation begins. This can take many forms. Gaslighting, where they deny your reality and make you question your own perceptions. Guilt tripping, where they make you feel responsible for their emotions and behaviors. Playing the victim, where they position themselves as wronged and you as the wrongdoer. Triangulation, where they bring third parties into the dynamic to make you jealous or insecure. These manipulations serve a purpose. To keep you off balance, to maintain control, to ensure the continued flow of narcissistic supply. As long as you're confused, guilty, trying to prove yourself, trying to fix things, you're providing what they need. The third tactic is devaluation. This often follows an initial period of idealization. The narcissist who once thought you were perfect now finds fault with everything you do. The praise turns to criticism. The attention turns to neglect. The warmth turns to coldness. This isn't because you've actually changed. It's because the narcissist's needs have changed, or because you're not providing narcissistic supply in the way they want, or simply because devaluation is part of their pattern. Why do they do this? Partly because it's another form of control. When you're desperately trying to get back to that initial wonderful phase, when you're working hard to regain their approval, you're providing narcissistic supply. You're proving to them that they have power over you, that they matter, that they're important enough to pursue. The fourth tactic is rage. When the narcissist feels challenged, criticized, or exposed, they often respond with what's called narcissistic rage. This is disproportionate anger, sometimes explosive, sometimes cold and calculating. The purpose is to punish you for threatening their self-image and to train you not to challenge them again. In mythology we see these patterns clearly. Think of the tyrant king who's wonderful to those who flatter him but viciously cruel to those who question him. Think of the false prophet who charms followers with promises but destroys those who see through the deception. Think of the dragon who hoards treasure and burns anyone who threatens his hoard. These are not just ancient stories. These are patterns that repeat. And many of us have encountered them in real life, in relationships with narcissistic individuals. Perhaps it was a parent, a partner, a boss, a friend. Someone who charmed us, then manipulated us, then devalued us, and raged when we tried to establish boundaries or see clearly. And here's what I've observed, both in the myths and in real life. These tactics work as long as the target is unaware, as long as they're still caught in the narcissist's web, as long as they're still trying to please, still trying to fix things, still believing that if they just do better, the relationship will improve. But what happens when you wake up? What happens when you see through the charm? What happens when you recognize the manipulation for what it is? What happens when you stop caring about the devaluation? What happens when you're no longer afraid of the rage? What happens when none of the usual tactics work anymore? The wake-up moment. Let me tell you about the moment when the narcissist's tactics stop working. I call this the wake-up moment, and it's a crucial point in the hero's journey when dealing with narcissistic individuals. The wake-up moment happens when you finally see clearly, when the fog lifts, when you recognize the pattern for what it is. This can happen suddenly, in a moment of shocking clarity, or gradually, as you accumulate evidence that something is fundamentally wrong with the relationship. Maybe you start noticing that the narcissist's stories don't add up. Maybe you catch them in lies. Maybe you see them treat someone else badly and realize they've been treating you the same way. Maybe you talk to others who've dealt with this person and hear the same patterns you've experienced. Maybe you just reach a breaking point where you can't deny the reality anymore. Whatever triggers it, the wake-up moment is when you finally see the narcissist for who they really are. Not the charming person they pretended to be. Not the victim they portray themselves as. Not the special person deserving of endless accommodation. But someone who's been using you, manipulating you, exploiting you for narcissistic supply. This moment is often accompanied by a range of emotions. Anger at being deceived. Grief for the relationship you thought you had but never really did. Shame for not seeing it sooner. Relief that you're finally seeing clearly. And often, a determination to set boundaries, to protect yourself, to stop playing the game. In the hero's journey, this is a threshold moment. The hero has been in the ordinary world, following the normal rules, playing along with the established order. But now they've seen something they can't unsee. They've received the call to adventure. They know they must leave the familiar, however uncomfortable the familiar has become, and venture into unknown territory. For someone dealing with a narcissist, this unknown territory is life without trying to please them, life without catering to their needs, life with boundaries, life where you prioritize your own well-being over their narcissistic supply. And this is when the narcissist's usual tactics stop working. Because once you see clearly, charm doesn't charm anymore. You recognize it as a manipulation. Guilt-tripping doesn't work anymore. You've realized you're not responsible for their emotions. Devaluation doesn't hurt the same way anymore. You've stopped seeking their approval. Even rage loses its power. You're willing to face it rather than comply to avoid it. This is a powerful position to be in. You've broken free from the narcissist's web. You're seeing clearly. You're no longer providing the narcissistic supply they need. You've become what I call immune to their usual tactics. But here's what's crucial to understand. The narcissist doesn't just accept this and move on. They don't just let you go. They don't just find someone else to manipulate. Not immediately. Not without one last attempt to regain control. Because you've done something that's intolerable to the narcissist. You've seen through them. You've stopped providing supply. You've threatened their self-image by refusing to play your role in maintaining their grandiosity. And they cannot let this stand. So they deploy the final tactic. The one they use when everything else has failed. The ultimate weapon in the narcissist's arsenal. The final tactic, discard and smear campaign. The final tactic, the one the narcissist uses when they can't manipulate you anymore, is this. They discard you and launch a smear campaign. They don't just let the relationship end. They destroy it spectacularly. And they work hard to destroy your reputation in the process. Let me be clear about what this looks like. The narcissist, faced with someone who can no longer be manipulated, makes a decision. They decide that since they can't control you, since you won't provide narcissistic supply, since you've seen through their facade, you're now worthless to them. Not just worthless but threatening. Because you know the truth about them, and that truth threatens their carefully constructed false image. So they discard you. They end the relationship, often suddenly, often brutally. There's no gentle letting go. There's no mutual decision. There's no respectful parting of ways. They simply decide you're done and they're done with you. Often they'll make it seem like it was entirely your fault. You failed them. You disappointed them. You weren't good enough. The very things they were doing to you, they now accuse you of doing to them. In mythology, this is the moment when the false king banishes the truth-teller from the kingdom. When the witch curses the one who's broken free of her spell. When the dragon, unable to keep the hero in his lair, tries to destroy the hero instead. But the discard isn't the worst part. The worst part is the smear campaign. The narcissist, faced with someone who knows the truth about them, goes on the offensive. They begin telling everyone who will listen a version of events where you're the villain and they're the victim. They twist facts, exaggerate your flaws, minimize or deny their own behaviors, and create a narrative where they're the wrong party and you're the abuser, the crazy one, the problem. Why do they do this? For several reasons. First, it's damage control. If you know the truth about them, they need to preemptively discredit you so that if you tell anyone what really happened, they won't be believed. If they've already told everyone you're crazy, unstable, vindictive, then when you try to explain what actually happened, people will think it's just confirmation of what the narcissist already told them. Second, it's narcissistic supply. The smear campaign gets them attention, sympathy, validation. People rally around them, tell them how terrible you are, how much better they deserve. This feeds their grandiose self-image and soothes the wound of your rejection. Third, it's punishment. You dare to see through them. You dare to stop playing your role. You dare to set boundaries. You dare to prioritize your own well-being over their needs. This is intolerable to the narcissist and you must be punished. The smear campaign is that punishment. It's designed to hurt you, to isolate you, to damage your reputation, to make you suffer for having the audacity to stop being manipulated. I've seen this pattern countless times. A person finally breaks free from a narcissistic relationship, feeling relieved and empowered. And then they're blindsided by the smear campaign. Suddenly, mutual friends are distant or hostile. Family members are getting concerning reports about them. Their professional reputation is being questioned. Lies are being spread. Their words are being twisted. And the narcissist is at the center of it all, playing the victim, gathering sympathy, and destroying the person who dared to see them clearly. This is devastating. It's one thing to break free from a manipulative relationship. It's another to then watch as that person tries to destroy your reputation, your relationships, your life. Feels profoundly unjust. You're the one who was manipulated, exploited, used, and now you're the one being portrayed as the perpetrator while the actual perpetrator plays the victim. In the hero's journey, this is what I call the ordeal. The hero has left the ordinary world, has crossed the threshold, has begun the journey, and now they face the greatest challenge. The dragon is most dangerous when cornered. The tyrant is most vicious when threatened. The narcissist is most destructive when exposed. Many people, when they encounter this tactic, feel tempted to give up. To go back to the narcissist, to apologize, to try to fix things just to make the smear campaign stop. Because it's so painful. Because the isolation is so hard. Because defending yourself against lies is so exhausting. But this is exactly what the narcissist wants. The smear campaign is designed not just to punish you but to pull you back in. If you come back, apologizing and complying, they've won. They've proven that they still have power over you. They've restored the dynamic where they control and you submit. And the cycle begins again. Understanding this tactic, really understanding it, is crucial. Because when you know it's coming, when you recognize it for what it is, when you understand it's not about truth but about control, you're better equipped to withstand it. Why this tactic is so effective? Let me explain why the discard and smear campaign is so devastatingly effective. Understanding this will help you see why it's the narcissist's final weapon and how to protect yourself against it. First, it exploits our fundamental need for social belonging. We are social creatures. We need community, connection, acceptance. The threat of social exclusion is one of the most painful threats we can face. Research shows that social rejection activates the same pain centers in the brain as physical pain. It literally hurts. The narcissist knows this, consciously or unconsciously. By launching a smear campaign, they're threatening your social standing, your connections, your sense of belonging. They're isolating you. And this isolation is painful enough that many people will do anything to stop it, including returning to the abusive relationship. In tribal societies, which is what humans evolved in, social exclusion could mean death. You couldn't survive alone. Being cast out of the tribe was one of the worst fates that could befall you. While we live in a different world now, that ancient fear of social exclusion is still wired into us. The narcissist weaponizes this ancient fear. Second, it exploits the fundamental attribution error. This is a psychological principle that says people tend to attribute others' behavior to their character but their own behavior to circumstances. When the narcissist is telling everyone that you're terrible, crazy, abusive, people are inclined to believe that these behaviors reflect your character. They don't see the full context. They don't know what you were responding to. They just hear the narcissist version where you're the bad guy. Meanwhile, if the narcissist exhibits bad behavior, they've already set up the narrative where it's justified, where they're the victim reacting to your terrible treatment. So the same behavior that would be seen as character flaws in you are seen as justified reactions in them. Third, it exploits the fact that lies travel faster than truth. The narcissist can spread lies quickly, dramatically, with emotional intensity. The truth is often more complex, more nuanced, harder to explain. By the time you've even heard about the lies being spread, the narcissist has already told their story to everyone who will listen. And once people have heard the first version, they tend to believe it, and subsequent information is filtered through that initial narrative. This is confirmation bias. Once people think they know what kind of person you are based on the narcissist's lies, they interpret everything you do through that lens. If you're upset about the lies, you're proving you're unstable. If you try to defend yourself, you're proving you're defensive and probably guilty. If you try to tell the truth about what happened, you're proving you're vindictive and attacking an innocent person. Fourth, it exploits the just world fallacy. This is the tendency people have to believe that the world is fair, that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. When people hear that you're being excluded, criticized, rejected, their unconscious assumption is often that you must have done something to deserve it. Otherwise, the world wouldn't be fair, and that's an uncomfortable thought. The narcissist takes advantage of this. By positioning themselves as the victim and you as the perpetrator, they're playing into people's desire to believe in a just world. If you're being treated badly, people unconsciously assume you must deserve it somehow. Fifth, and this is perhaps most insidious, it exploits your own tendency towards self-doubt. When you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, you've likely been gaslit extensively. You've been told your perceptions are wrong, your memories are false, your reactions are crazy. Even after you've woken up and seen clearly, there's often a residue of self-doubt. When the smear campaign happens, when multiple people are suddenly treating you like you're the problem, that self-doubt can come roaring back. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe I am the problem. Maybe I'm remembering things wrong. The smear campaign reactivates all the gaslighting the narcissist did during the relationship. I've seen people who were absolutely certain about what happened, who had clear evidence of the narcissist's manipulation, start to doubt themselves when faced with a smear campaign. Because when enough people are telling you that you're wrong, it's hard to maintain your conviction that you're right. This is why the smear campaign is the ultimate tactic. It's not just an attack on your reputation. It's an attack on your reality, your relationships, your sense of self, your place in your community, your confidence in your own perceptions. It's designed to be so painful, so destabilizing, so isolating that you'll do anything to make it stop, including going back to the narcissist and submitting to their manipulation again. The mythology of this pattern. Now, let me share something I find fascinating. This pattern, this final tactic of the narcissist, it appears again and again in mythology. The stories our ancestors told show that this pattern has been part of human experience for as long as humans have been human. Think about the story of Cassandra. She's given the gift of prophecy by Apollo, but when she rejects his advances, he curses her so that no one will ever believe her prophecies. She sees the truth, she speaks the truth, but she's discredited. This is the smear campaign in mythological form. The powerful figure, rejected, ensures that the one who rejected them will not be believed, will not be trusted, will be seen as crazy even when speaking truth. Or think about the archetype of the scapegoat. In ancient rituals, the sins of the community would be symbolically placed on a goat, which was then driven out into the wilderness. The community, instead of dealing with its own shadow, its own problems, projects them onto an innocent victim who is then expelled. This is exactly what happens in a narcissistic smear campaign. The narcissist's own behaviors, their own flaws, their own abusive patterns are projected onto you, and then you're cast out. Consider the story of Joseph and his brothers. Joseph is his father's favorite, and his brothers are jealous. So they throw him in a pit and sell him into slavery, but they tell their father he was killed by wild animals. They create a false narrative to cover their own actions and to destroy Joseph's reputation. This is a smear campaign. The brothers can't control Joseph's favor with their father, so they remove him and lie about what happened. Or look at the countless myths where a hero speaks truth to power and is then banished from the kingdom. the prophet who warns the king and is imprisoned, the truth-teller who points out the emperor has no clothes and is called a liar, the one who sees through the illusion and is cast out as a troublemaker. These stories appear across cultures because they're describing a real pattern of human behavior. They're teaching us something important, that those who are invested in false images, in grandiose self-perceptions, in power maintained through deception, they will destroy those who threaten that false image. And one of their primary tools is destroying the reputation, the credibility, the social standing of the truth-teller. The myths also teach us something else important: what happens next. Because the story doesn't end with the expulsion. Joseph, sold into slavery, eventually becomes the second most powerful man in Egypt and saves his family during famine. Cassandra, though not believed, was right all along, and history remembers her truth. The exiled prophet often returns with wisdom gained in the wilderness. The hero's journey always includes what I call the road of trials. After crossing the threshold, after facing the initial challenges, the hero must undergo a series of tests. Being discarded and smeared by a narcissist is one of these trials. It's painful. It's difficult. But it's also potentially transformative. Because here's what the myths teach us: being cast out of the false kingdom, being rejected by those who live in illusion, being discredited by those invested in lies, this is often necessary for the hero to find their true path. As long as you're seeking approval from those who cannot see truth, as long as you're trying to fit into systems that reward deception, as long as you're playing by rules designed to maintain false hierarchies, you cannot fully become who you're meant to be. The discard, as painful as it is, frees you. The smear campaign, as devastating as it is, clarifies who truly knows you and who was only ever seeing the narcissist's projection. The isolation, as lonely as it is, creates space for you to discover your authentic self, your true path, your real community. This doesn't make it less painful, but it does give it meaning. You're not just a victim of a narcissist's cruelty. You're a hero undergoing the necessary trials of transformation. And the myths, which have sustained humanity for thousands of years, promise that there's something on the other side of this trial. How to survive the smear campaign. So what do you do when you're facing this final tactic? When you've broken free from the narcissist's manipulation and now you're facing their discard and smear campaign? Let me offer you some wisdom drawn from both mythology and practical experience. First, understand that you cannot win by playing their game. The narcissist is a master manipulator. They're skilled at creating false narratives, at gathering sympathy, at playing the victim. If you try to fight fire with fire, if you try to create your own smear campaign against them, you'll lose. Not because they're better people, but because they're more practiced at this game. They have no conscience constraining them. They're willing to lie, exaggerate, manipulate in ways you probably aren't. Moreover, engaging in that battle pulls you down to their level. It makes you become like them. And even if you win the PR battle, you lose something essential about yourself in the process. Remember, the hero's journey is not about defeating the villain by becoming the villain. It's about maintaining your integrity while navigating the challenges. In the myths, the hero doesn't beat the dragon by becoming a dragon. They beat the dragon by being true to their heroic nature, by using their unique gifts, by staying on their path. Your path is truth, integrity, authenticity. Don't abandon that to fight on the narcissist's terms. Second, focus on documentation and boundaries, not revenge or justification. Document everything. Keep records of communications, of events, of evidence. Not to launch your own campaign, but to protect yourself. If legal issues arise, if you need to defend yourself formally, if authorities need to be involved, you'll have evidence. But don't spend your energy trying to convince everyone of the truth. Don't go person to person explaining what really happened. This is exhausting. It rarely works because the narcissist got there first, and it keeps you trapped in the drama. Instead, set clear boundaries. Decide who in your life deserves an explanation, give it once clearly and calmly, and then move on. If they don't believe you, that's information about them, not about you. Third, trust that the truth has a way of emerging over time. This requires patience, which is hard when you're in pain. But one of the consistent patterns I've observed is that narcissists don't change their behavior. They repeat it. The same patterns they enacted with you, they'll enact with others. The same manipulations they used on you, they'll use on new people. And eventually, others start to see what you saw. The people who believe the narcissist's smear campaign, many of them will eventually have their own experience that makes them question the narrative. The narcissist will likely turn on some of them. Or they'll witness behavior that doesn't match the victim's story they were told. Or they'll notice inconsistencies. And slowly the truth emerges. In the mythology, this is the principle of nemesis, of divine justice, of karma. The truth will out, as Shakespeare said. Not always quickly, not always in ways that feel satisfying, but the truth has power. Lies, even well-crafted ones, are unstable. They require constant maintenance. Truth is stable. It doesn't need to be propped up. Your job is not to force this process or to prove your innocence to everyone. Your job is to live in integrity and trust that truth will ultimately reveal itself. Fourth, find your real tribe. The smear campaign will show you who your real friends are. The people who know you, who trust you, who are willing to hear your side and think critically about what they're being told, these are your people. The ones who immediately believe the narcissist's lies without even talking to you, these are not your people. They never were. This is painful to discover, but it's also valuable. You're being shown who has depth of relationship with you and who is always superficial. Who has discernment and who is easily manipulated. Who is willing to stand with you in difficulty and who only wants to be around for the easy times. In the hero's journey, this is when the hero finds their true companions. Not the false friends from the ordinary world, but the real allies who will walk with them through the underworld and back. These are the relationships worth investing in. Also, seek out people who've been through similar experiences. There are communities of people who've dealt with narcissists, who understand the smear campaign, who can offer support and wisdom. These people can validate your reality when you're being gaslit by proxy. They can remind you that you're not crazy, that what happened was real, that the smear campaign is a known tactic, not evidence that you're actually the problem. Fifth, focus on your own healing and growth. This is perhaps the most important point. The narcissist wants you focused on them, on the campaign, on defending yourself, on trying to fix your reputation. They want you trapped in their drama, giving them attention, proving they still have power over you. Don't give them that. Instead, turn your focus inward. What do you need to heal from this experience? What did this relationship reveal about your own patterns, your own wounds, your own vulnerabilities that made you susceptible to narcissistic manipulation in the first place? How can you grow from this? How can you become stronger, more discerning, more boundaried? This is not victim blaming. You're not responsible for the narcissist's behavior, but you are responsible for your own healing and growth. And sometimes difficult experiences, as painful as they are, offer opportunities for profound transformation. In mythology, the hero often receives gifts during the ordeal. They might find a magical object, gain wisdom from a mentor, discover inner strengths they didn't know they had. The smear campaign is your ordeal. What gifts can you find in it? What are you learning? How are you growing? The deeper pattern, shadow and projection. Now I want to go deeper into what's really happening here from a psychological and mythological perspective. Because the smear campaign isn't just a tactic. It's a revelation of a profound psychological process that the myths have been teaching about for millennia. What the narcissist is doing in the smear campaign is projecting their shadow onto you. The shadow, in Jungian psychology, is the part of ourselves we don't want to acknowledge, the traits and impulses we consider unacceptable, the aspects of our personality we repress and deny. Everyone has a shadow. This is normal and human. The difference is that healthy people gradually learn to acknowledge and integrate their shadow. They recognize, yes, I have selfish impulses. Yes, I have aggressive tendencies. Yes, I have flaws and weaknesses. And they work with these aspects of themselves, neither acting them out unconsciously nor denying their existence. But the narcissist cannot do this. Their entire psychological structure is built on maintaining a grandiose self-image and denying anything that contradicts it. So they can't acknowledge their own flaws, their own manipulations, their own abusive behaviors. These are too threatening to their fragile self-image. Instead, they project these shadow qualities onto others. This is an unconscious psychological defense mechanism where they take their own unacceptable traits and attribute them to someone else. Then they can attack these traits in the other person, which allows them to feel righteous while avoiding any self-examination. This is exactly what's happening in the smear campaign. The narcissist is projecting all their own shadow qualities onto you. Their manipulation becomes your manipulation. Their cruelty becomes your cruelty. Their instability becomes your instability. Their abuse becomes your abuse. They take everything they've done and flip it, making you the perpetrator and themselves the victim. This is why the accusations often feel so uncanny. The things the narcissist accuses you of are often exactly what they did. They're describing their own behavior but claiming it was yours. If you've been manipulated, they'll accuse you of being manipulative. If you've been gaslit, they'll accuse you of gaslighting them. If you've been the victim of rage, they'll claim they were the victim of your rage. This projection is a core part of narcissistic psychology. And understanding it helps you not take the smear campaign personally. These accusations are not really about you. They're about the narcissist's inability to own their own shadow. You're a screen onto which they're projecting the movie of their own denied darkness. In mythology, this pattern appears as the shadow figure, the dark double, the evil twin. The hero often encounters a figure who embodies their own shadow qualities. But while the hero must integrate and transcend their shadow, the villain projects it outward, seeing it everywhere except in themselves. Think about the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Jekyll creates Hyde as a separate entity to contain his shadow impulses. But Hyde keeps growing stronger because Jekyll refuses to integrate and take responsibility for this shadow aspect. The split between the idealized self and the denied shadow eventually destroys him. This is the narcissist's predicament. By refusing to acknowledge their own shadow, by projecting it onto others, they become enslaved to it. They must constantly find new scapegoats to contain their projected shadow. And the intensity with which they attack these scapegoats is proportional to the intensity with which they're defending against recognizing these traits in themselves. Understanding this doesn't make the smear campaign less painful, but it does help you see it's not really about you. You're not actually the terrible person they're describing. You're a convenient target for their projection. And recognizing this can help you not internalize their accusations. The narcissist's end game. Now you might be wondering, what's the narcissist's end game here? What do they actually want from the discard and smear campaign? Understanding their goals helps you not get pulled back into their web. The first goal is to hurt you. This is simple revenge. You challenge their grandiosity by seeing through them and refusing to be manipulated. You threaten their self-image by setting boundaries. You dare to prioritize your own well-being over their narcissistic supply. They want you to suffer for this. The pain you feel from being discarded, from being smeared, from watching your reputation destroyed, from losing relationships, this satisfies their need for revenge. They want you to regret ever standing up to them. They want you to learn that challenging them has consequences. They want you to be afraid of them even after the relationship has ended. The second goal is to control the narrative. Remember, you know the truth about them. You've seen behind the mask. You could potentially tell others what you've experienced. This is threatening to the narcissist. Their public image, their reputation, their ability to manipulate others, all of this depends on people not seeing their true nature. By getting ahead of you with the smear campaign, by establishing the narrative where you're the problem and they're the victim, they preemptively discredit you. Now if you try to tell anyone what really happened, they've already been primed not to believe you. You're the crazy one, the vindictive one, the unreliable narrator. The narcissist has protected their image by destroying yours. The third goal is to maintain narcissistic supply. Even though you're no longer providing supply, the smear campaign itself becomes a source of supply. They get attention, sympathy, validation from everyone they tell their victim story to. They get to feel special, wronged, deserving of support. People rally around them, which feeds their grandiosity. Moreover, knowing that you're suffering, knowing that they've hurt you, knowing that they've successfully damaged your reputation, this also provides narcissistic supply. It proves to them that they have power, that they matter, that they can impact your life. Even negative attention, even the pain they cause, serves as supply. The fourth goal, and this is crucial to understand, is to hoover you back in. Hoover is a term used in discussions of narcissistic relationships, named after the vacuum cleaner brand, because the narcissist tries to suck you back into the relationship. The discard and smear campaign, as destructive as they are, often have an underlying purpose: to make you so desperate, so isolated, so hurt that you'll come back. Think about it. If the smear campaign is effective, you've lost friends, your reputation is damaged, you're socially isolated, you're doubting yourself, you're in pain. Who's the one person who could make all of this stop? The narcissist. If you go back to them, apologize, submit to their control, they can end the campaign. They can tell everyone it was all a misunderstanding. They can restore your social connections. They can validate your reality again. This is the trap. The very person who's causing all this pain is positioned as the only one who can relieve it. And many people, worn down by the campaign, isolated and doubting themselves, do go back. They apologize for things they didn't do. They accept blame they don't deserve. They submit to control they had fought to escape, just to make the pain stop. And if you do go back, the narcissist has won completely. They've proven that they can discard you and you'll still come back. They've demonstrated their power over you. They've trained you that the consequences of leaving are so severe that you should never try again. And they've secured a renewed source of narcissistic supply from someone who's now even more compliant than before. This is why understanding the end game is so important. If you know that part of the purpose of the smear campaign is to pull you back in, you're less likely to fall for it. You can recognize that going back isn't a solution, it's a trap. The pain you're feeling is real, but returning to the narcissist will only create more pain in the long run. The fifth goal is to protect their future ability to manipulate others. By destroying your credibility, the narcissist ensures that they can continue to operate freely. Future victims won't be warned. Mutual acquaintances won't be cautious. The narcissist's reputation remains intact, allowing them to charm, manipulate, and exploit new sources of narcissistic supply without interference. This is why narcissists often work so hard on their smear campaigns. It's not just about you. It's about maintaining their entire system of manipulation. You're not their first victim and you won't be their last. But by discrediting you, they ensure that the pattern can continue. The path through, becoming the hero of your own story. Now we come to the most important part. How do you not just survive this final tactic but transform through it? How do you use this ordeal to become more fully yourself, more awake, more alive? How do you become the hero of your own story rather than the victim in the narcissist's narrative? First, you must reclaim your story. The narcissist has created a false narrative where they're the victim and you're the villain. This narrative is being told to everyone who will listen. But you don't have to accept this as your story. You don't have to internalize this narrative. You can know your own truth even if others don't believe it yet. In mythology, this is the hero claiming their true name, their true identity. Many heroes and myths go through a period where they're given false names, false identities, where who they really are is obscured or denied. But eventually they reclaim their true identity. They say, "This is who I actually am. This is my real story." You don't need everyone to know your story. You don't need everyone to believe your version. But you need to know it yourself. You need to be clear about what actually happened, what your part was, what their part was, what's true and what's projection. Write it down if that helps. Tell it to a therapist, a trusted friend, someone who can witness your truth. But know your own story and don't let the narcissist's false narrative become your internal narrative. Second, you must grieve what was lost. This is crucial. When you're discarded and smeared, you lose things. You lose the relationship even though it was toxic. You lose your standing in certain communities. You lose friendships with people who believe the false narrative. You lose the future you might have imagined. These are real losses and they deserve to be grieved. In the hero's journey, there's always a death before the rebirth. The old self must die. The old world must end. And this requires grieving. You can't skip this step. You can't just push forward without acknowledging what you've lost. If you try, the grief will catch up with you later, often in destructive ways. But here's what's important to understand about this grief. You're not grieving the relationship as it actually was. The relationship was based on manipulation, on false pretenses, on exploitation. What you're grieving is the relationship as you thought it was, as you hoped it would be, as the narcissist presented it during the idealization phase. You're grieving the illusion. And this is important grief. Because that illusion meant something to you. Those hopes and dreams and investments of your heart were real, even if the narcissist's reciprocation was not. Honor that grief. Let yourself feel it. But also recognize that you're not grieving something real that you lost. You're grieving something you never actually had. Third, you must do the shadow work. Earlier I talked about how the narcissist projects their shadow onto you. But here's an uncomfortable truth. There might be something in their accusations that, while wildly exaggerated and distorted, points to something real in you that needs examination. This doesn't mean you're the villain in their story. This doesn't mean their accusations are true. But sometimes projections work because there's a hook, however small, for them to hang on. Maybe you did have moments of anger, but they were healthy responses to being abused, not evidence that you're an angry person. Maybe you did set boundaries, but those were necessary self-protection, not evidence that you're controlling. The narcissist takes these small truths and distorts them wildly. But you can use their distorted accusations as a prompt for honest self-examination. Not to confirm their narrative but to do your own shadow work. What parts of yourself did you lose in that relationship? What parts did you suppress? What parts are you afraid of? What parts need integration? This is the hero's journey into the underworld, into the unconscious, into the shadow. It's not comfortable. But it's necessary for wholeness. And the benefit is that by integrating your shadow consciously and honestly, you become less susceptible to manipulation through projection in the future. Fourth, you must rebuild your life with intention. The discard and smear campaign has torn down much of your old life. Your old social network might be fractured. Your old sense of self might be shaken. Your old assumptions about relationships and trust might be shattered. This is devastating. But it's also, potentially, an opportunity. You get to rebuild. You get to choose what kind of life you want to create. You get to decide what values will guide you, what boundaries you'll maintain, what kind of people you'll invest in. You're starting from scratch in some ways, which is scary. But it also means you're not constrained by the old patterns, the old compromises, the old ways of being that allowed narcissistic manipulation in the first place. In mythology, this is the return from the journey. The hero comes back to the ordinary world, but they're transformed. They bring back gifts, wisdom, new ways of being. They don't just reconstruct their old life. They create something new informed by everything they've learned. You're doing the same thing. You're not going back to who you were before the narcissist. You're becoming someone new, someone wiser, someone with better boundaries, someone less susceptible to manipulation. Use this opportunity consciously. Build the life you actually want, not the life you settled for before. Fifth, and this is perhaps most important, you must develop compassion for yourself. You will make mistakes in this process. You will have moments where you doubt yourself, where you wonder if the narcissist was right about you, where you feel weak for having been manipulated. You will have moments where you're angry at yourself for not seeing it sooner, for staying too long, for losing so much. This self-judgment is normal, but it's not helpful. You were dealing with a skilled manipulator. You were caught in a psychological pattern that has trapped countless people throughout history. You did the best you could with the awareness you had at the time. And when you gained new awareness, you made changes. That's all anyone can do. Treat yourself the way you would treat a dear friend going through the same thing. With compassion, with understanding, with patience. The hero's journey is hard. The ordeal is painful. You don't need to add self-punishment to the challenges you're already facing. The transformation, what lies beyond. Now let me tell you about what lies on the other side of this ordeal. If you navigate it consciously, if you do the work, if you become the hero of your own story rather than remaining the victim in someone else's. First, you develop what I call psychological immunity to manipulation. Once you've been through a relationship with a narcissist, once you've experienced the full arsenal of their tactics including the final smear campaign, you become much harder to manipulate in the future. You recognize the patterns earlier. You trust your instincts when something feels off. You set boundaries more quickly and more firmly. This doesn't mean you become paranoid or unable to trust anyone, but you do become more discerning. You can distinguish between healthy relationships and toxic ones more quickly. You can see red flags you might have missed before. You know what genuine empathy looks like versus performed empathy designed to manipulate. This is like the hero gaining wisdom from their ordeal. They're not the same naive person who left the village at the beginning of the journey. They've learned to recognize evil, to see through deception, to trust their own judgment. This wisdom is hard-won, but it's invaluable. Second, you develop authentic self-worth. When you've been through a narcissist discard and smear campaign and you've survived it, when you've maintained your integrity despite the lies, when you've stood by your truth even when others didn't believe it, you develop a kind of self-worth that doesn't depend on external validation. You learn that your worth is inherent, not dependent on what others think of you. You learn that you can survive social rejection and loss of reputation. You learn that your sense of self can remain intact even when others are attacking it. This creates a foundation of self-worth that's much more stable than the approval-seeking self-worth that made you vulnerable to narcissistic manipulation in the first place. This is the hero discovering their true power, their real strength. Not the false power of domination that the villain seeks, but the authentic power of self-knowledge, self-acceptance, self-determination. Third, you develop genuine empathy and the ability to help others. Once you've been through this experience, you can recognize others who are going through it. You can offer them the understanding, the validation, the wisdom they need. You can be the mentor that you might have desperately needed during your own ordeal. This is one of the gifts the hero brings back from the journey, the ability to guide others. Your suffering, if you transform it into wisdom, becomes a gift you can offer to others who are suffering. Your ordeal, if you learn from it, becomes a teaching that can help others navigate their own ordeals. I've seen this again and again. People who've been through narcissistic relationships and smear campaigns often become the most compassionate, the most helpful, the most effective helpers for others going through the same thing. They can say, "I know what you're experiencing. I've been there. It's real. You're not crazy. And you can get through it." And those words, from someone who's actually been through it, have a power that no textbook knowledge can match. Fourth, you develop a deeper relationship with truth. When you've been through a smear campaign, when you've been lied about extensively, when you've seen how easily people believe false narratives, you develop a profound appreciation for truth. Not truth as propaganda or truth as social consensus, but truth as what actually is, as direct experience, as integrity. You become less willing to compromise truth for social acceptance. You become more committed to honesty even when it's uncomfortable. You become someone who values and seeks and speaks truth, because you've experienced the destructiveness of lies. This is the hero becoming a truth bearer, a light bringer. They've been to the darkness and they've come back with light. They've experienced the destructiveness of lies and they've committed to truth. This commitment to truth is one of the most valuable transformations that can come from this ordeal. Fifth, you develop a richer, deeper understanding of human nature. You've seen the shadow side of humanity in the narcissist. You've experienced how destructive human beings can be to each other. But you've also, if you've done the work, integrated your own shadow. You've recognized that capacity for darkness exists in all of us, including yourself. This doesn't make you cynical. It makes you realistic. You have clear eyes about human nature. You understand that people are complex, that everyone has light and shadow, that the line between good and evil runs through every human heart. This understanding makes you wiser, more compassionate, more realistic in your expectations of yourself and others. This is the hero achieving wisdom. Not the naive innocence of the beginning of the journey, but the mature wisdom that comes from experiencing darkness and choosing light, from seeing evil and choosing good, from understanding human capacity for harm and choosing human capacity for healing. The larger pattern, narcissism and culture. Before I conclude, I want to pull back and look at the larger pattern. Because narcissism isn't just an individual psychological phenomenon, it's a cultural pattern. And understanding this helps you see your personal experience in a larger context. We live in a culture that, in many ways, encourages narcissistic traits. The emphasis on individual achievement, on standing out, on building personal brands, on curating perfect public images, on measuring worth through external metrics like wealth and fame and social media followers, all of this feeds narcissistic tendencies. The mythology of our time often celebrates the narcissistic hero, the self-made individual who needs no one, the genius who's justified in treating others badly because they're special, the winner who takes all and tramples anyone in their way. These are often portrayed as admirable, as aspirational, rather than as cautionary tales. But the ancient myths, the stories that have sustained humanity for millennia, they tell a different story. They show us that the narcissistic pattern is destructive, both to others and ultimately to the narcissist themselves. They show us that genuine heroism is not about grandiosity but about service. Not about domination but about sacrifice. Not about standing above others but about standing for something greater than yourself. When you're dealing with a narcissist on an individual level, you're also, in a sense, confronting a cultural pattern. You're refusing to participate in a way of being that our culture often rewards and celebrates. You're choosing truth over image, substance over appearance, genuine connection over performative relationship. This is why your personal journey has larger significance. By refusing to be manipulated, by surviving the smear campaign, by maintaining your integrity, by transforming your ordeal into wisdom, you're not just saving yourself. You're demonstrating an alternative way of being. You're living out a different myth than the narcissistic myth our culture often promotes. You're showing that it's possible to be strong without dominating, to be confident without grandiosity, to be successful without exploiting, to have healthy self-regard without narcissism. You're embodying the authentic heroism that the ancient myths have always been teaching. The heroism of integrity, of truth, of genuine courage, of service to something greater than yourself. The final teaching, forgiveness and moving forward. Now I want to end with perhaps the most challenging teaching, but also the most liberating. Forgiveness. Not forgiveness as condoning what the narcissist did. Not forgiveness as reconciling with them. Not forgiveness as pretending it wasn't that bad. But forgiveness as releasing them from your internal world, as freeing yourself from the ongoing burden of resentment, as choosing to move forward rather than remaining tied to the past. When you've been discarded and smeared, when you've been lied about and your reputation destroyed, the natural response is anger and a desire for justice or revenge. You want the narcissist to be exposed. You want everyone to know what they really are. You want them to suffer consequences. You want them to admit what they did and apologize. These are understandable desires. But here's what I've learned from studying the myths and from observing life. Waiting for the narcissist to give you justice or acknowledgement or apology is waiting for something that will probably never come. And in that waiting you remain bound to them. They continue to occupy space in your mind, your heart, your energy. They continue to have power over you even though the relationship has ended. Forgiveness in the sense I'm talking about is not about them. It's about you. It's about choosing to release the resentment that's poisoning you. It's about accepting that you'll probably never get the acknowledgement or justice you deserve. It's about making peace with what happened so you can move forward. This doesn't mean you forget what happened. This doesn't mean you trust the narcissist again or let them back into your life. This doesn't mean you stop telling your truth or setting boundaries. Forgiveness and boundaries are not opposed. You can forgive someone and still never speak to them again. You can release resentment and still protect yourself. In the hero's journey, there's often a moment of forgiveness or release near the end. The hero doesn't remain consumed by vengeance. They don't define themselves by their opposition to the villain. They complete their journey, they achieve their transformation, and they move forward into their new life, no longer bound by the past. This is your work now. To forgive not because the narcissist deserves it, but because you deserve to be free. To release not because what happened was okay, but because holding on is hurting you. To move forward not because justice was served, but because your life is too precious to spend it looking backward. Conclusion: your hero's journey continues. So here we are at the end of our exploration of the narcissist's final tactic. You've learned that when narcissists can't manipulate you anymore, when their usual tactics of charm, manipulation, devaluation, and rage no longer work, they discard you and launch a smear campaign. This is their ultimate weapon, designed to hurt you, control the narrative, maintain narcissistic supply, potentially pull you back in, and protect their ability to manipulate others in the future. You've learned why this tactic is so devastatingly effective. It exploits our need for social belonging, our cognitive biases, our tendency towards self-doubt, our desire to believe in a just world. You've learned that this pattern appears throughout mythology, teaching us that truth-tellers and those who refuse to maintain false images have always faced discrediting and exile. You've learned how to survive this tactic. By not playing their game, by documenting but not seeking revenge, by trusting that truth emerges over time, by finding your real tribe, by focusing on your own healing and growth. You've learned about the deeper psychology of shadow and projection underlying the smear campaign. And most importantly, you've learned how to transform this ordeal into growth. By reclaiming your story, grieving what was lost, doing shadow work, rebuilding with intention, and developing compassion for yourself. You've learned about the gifts that await on the other side. Psychological immunity to manipulation, authentic self-worth, the ability to help others, a deeper relationship with truth, and a richer understanding of human nature. Your journey with the narcissist was painful. The discard and smear campaign is one of the most difficult ordeals you can face. But you're not just a victim of their manipulation. You're a hero on a journey. And like all heroes, you have the opportunity to transform your ordeal into wisdom, your suffering into strength, your wounding into healing. The narcissist wanted to destroy you with their final tactic. But what they've actually done is given you the opportunity to destroy your false self, your people-pleasing patterns, your dependence on external validation, your tolerance for manipulation. They've inadvertently initiated you into a deeper, more authentic way of being. This doesn't mean you should be grateful for the abuse. You shouldn't. It was wrong, it was harmful, it was unjust. But you can take what was meant to harm you and use it as fuel for your transformation. You can take the ordeal they created and use it as the crucible for forging a stronger, wiser, more authentic version of yourself. The hero's journey doesn't end with surviving the ordeal. It continues. You return to the ordinary world, but you're changed. You bring back gifts. You live differently. You relate differently. You're different. And in being different, in embodying the transformation you've achieved, you become a light for others who are still in the darkness you've escaped. So go forward. Live your truth. Maintain your boundaries. Trust your judgment. Build authentic relationships. Help others who are where you once were. And know that the narcissist's final tactic, as devastating as it was meant to be, has actually freed you to become more fully yourself than you ever were before. The journey continues. And you are the hero of your own story.